You are Ahmed al-Sharaa. No one knows your real name. For 10 years, people have known you as al-Julani, a name tied to land no longer under anyone from your family's control, land that was taken before you were old enough to bear its weight. You now live in Damascus, in the Meta district, in a house that differs from the neighboring homes in only one way. Your father refuses to forget. He turns on the news in the morning, in the evening, and in the middle of the night, and the voices of the news anchors fill the rooms, as if words alone could restore lost land. You are the son of a man who believed in Gamal Abdel Nasser, in Arab unity, and in the idea that Arabs are one people. Then he watched everything collapse. The Union broke apart, the Ba'ath seized power, the Golan was occupied, and the family carried its belongings and walked away. This is the air you have breathed since birth, the air of a displaced person living in a good house but without owning his land. In 2000, you are around 16 years old, and the television shows Ramallah and Gaza. You see a child your age die behind his father, and the bullets do not distinguish between anything. Something breaks inside you at that moment. Or perhaps something is formed, because what happens to you does not resemble breaking. It resembles finding something that had been lost. Its name is jihad. A word you had heard many times, but that had always been abstract, suddenly becomes tangible. It becomes footsteps walking, decisions being made, and real people going to real places. Then in 2001, you hear about Osama bin Laden and Afghanistan. Your father follows the news, and you sit behind him listening to every word. Something in the story of the man who left his wealth and went to fight touches a string inside you whose name you do not yet know. But you do not move yet. You wait, even though you do not know what you are waiting for. The answer comes in 2003. America invades Iraq, the world is divided, and young men from everywhere begin to move. You make the decision in complete silence. You do not tell your father, you do not tell your mother, you tell no one. You choose for yourself an alias, Abu Muhammad al-Julani. You carry the Golan with you even in your hidden name, as if you cannot leave it behind even while leaving everything else. You cross the border into Iraq, and in your pocket there is nothing that proves who you are, and that is exactly what you want. Iraq receives you in its own way. The heat, the chaos, the smell of smoke that never leaves the air. You join al-Qaeda because it is the only organized force before you, and because the goal at the beginning is clear. The occupying American is the enemy. You learn how to fight, how to move, how to disappear. But you also learn something you did not expect, that you are different from many of the people around you. Not in courage nor in faith, but in the way you think. You see an organization that kills those who do not deserve to be killed, declares unbelievers those who disagree with it, and builds a kingdom out of fear while calling it jihad. You remain silent because you have no alternative, but something inside you rejects it, accumulates it, and remembers. In 2006, arrest does not come as you imagine it in war films. No chase, no gunfire, no dramatic moment. It comes with unsettling simplicity. And suddenly, you find yourself in Camp Bucca, an American prison among a huge number of men from many nationalities. For you, prison is not the end of the story, but one chapter of it. You watch, you endure, you learn. Then comes the moment that will determine the course of your entire life. The Americans want to release only Iraqis, and they bring Iraqi officers to test accents. You are Syrian, but you have spent years among Iraqis, and the Iraqi dialect comes naturally to your mouth. You pass the test without even blinking. They release you. You stand behind the barbed wire in the morning light and realize something you had never known before, that you can be several people at once, and that this ability may be the most dangerous weapon you possess. You leave and join the Islamic State organization under the leadership of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, not because you believe everything he says, but because there is no other option before you at that moment. But the contradiction inside you grows day by day. Al-Baghdadi builds a state on iron and blood, turning takfir into a tool of control. He strikes Muslims before striking their enemies. You see it and understand it, but you learn the art of strategic patience. Do not move before you are ready. Do not break what you cannot rebuild. Then comes 2011, and the Arab Spring strikes Syria, and your father's land ignites. Al-Baghdadi asks you to go to Syria to establish an arm of the organization there. You say yes, but you carry with you an entirely different agenda. You want to return to your home, to your country, to fight the Assad regime that turned your father and thousands of families into displaced people in their own land. This is personal before it is ideological, even if you tell no one. In Syria, you establish Jabhat al-Nusra. Very quickly, you realize that you are good at something many other factions are not: managing people. You do not focus only on fighters, but drop close to civilians. You listen. You understand what they want. You build trust gradually. Your new rule becomes the people before the weapon. But the major crisis comes in 2013. Al-Baghdadi announces the merger of Jabhat al-Nusra into the Islamic State. He wants you under his command once again. Here, you stand and say no, not in a whisper, publicly. You reject the merger and declare allegiance to al-Qaeda, announcing that Jabhat al-Nusra is a front for the liberation of Syria. This decision exposes you to death from two sides at once: the Islamic State on one side and the Assad regime on the other. You enter battles on two fronts and live real chaos. But you do not retreat, because you know one fundamental truth. Whoever retreats at a moment like this can never rebuild what has been broken. In 2016, you announce a complete separation from al-Qaeda. This decision is harder than the first, because it is not a rejection of an enemy, but a break with former allies. The name changes from Jabhat al-Nusra to Jabhat Fatah al-Sham, and then you go further and establish Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. People ask why the name changed. Inside you, the answer is clearer than what you say aloud. Names carry history, and you want to build something new, something the world can deal with from a different starting point. You learned the hardest lesson of this phase. Fighting is not enough. Politics is necessary. And the image you present to the world is not a betrayal of your principles, but one of your tools. Aleppo falls in 2016. This means retreating to Idlib. The loss is painful in a way different from anything you had known before, because it is the loss of an entire city, real people, and a future you thought had begun to take shape. But you do not allow yourself to collapse in front of those with you. You retreat to Idlib and decide that you will build a state within a state, not temporarily, but as a model. Hospitals, schools, infrastructure, a relative judiciary, internal security. The people living under your control begin comparing their lives with those under the regime, and what they see convinces them that something different is possible. This is not pure generosity. You know that popular legitimacy is the foundation that remains when everything else falls, and you build it with calculation and full awareness. Between 2017 and 2024, you live 7 years of contradictions. Russian bombardment is intermittent, but never stops. International pressure to classify Hayat Tahrir al-Sham as a terrorist organization makes every step toward normalization feel like a walk through a minefield. You begin appearing gradually in public. You give interviews. You speak in careful, diplomatic language. In an interview with PBS Frontline, you appear in civilian clothes and speak calmly about Syria's future. Some of those with you ask in private, "Is this a concession?" You answer them with a counter-question. Do you want to liberate Syria, or do you want to remain pure individuals imprisoned within 3 provinces? No one answers clearly, but no one opposes you either. Then November 2024 comes. The decision arrives with timing calculated more precisely than most people can see from the outside. Iran is distracted. Russia is burdened by Ukraine. Hezbollah is exhausted in Lebanon. And the ranks of the Assad regime have been hollowed out from within after years of corruption and exhaustion. You launched the operation under the name Deterrence of Aggression. Within hours, the columns moved toward Aleppo. You know that you are gambling with everything you built over 7 years. Every man, every weapon, every piece of popular legitimacy. All of it on a single, irreversible step. But you gamble because you know the opportunity will not come again, and that whoever does not move when the window opens will sit behind the glass until death. On the second day, you enter Aleppo. You stand in the citadel after years of absence. You do not cry. You do not make grand statements. Perhaps you only look down at the city from above and understand the scale of what is happening. Your men consolidate control. Civilians pour into the streets. Some cannot believe what they're seeing. The battle of liberation moves from city to city at a speed that confuses even observers who had expected fierce resistance. The army that had for decades been an instrument of repression had been eaten away from within, and no one was prepared to die defending a regime they no longer believed in. 11 days. On the 8th of December, the Assad regime falls. Bashar al-Assad flees Damascus. The capital is in your hands without the need for battles that would destroy what you want to build. You enter Damascus under your real name for the first time since 2003, Ahmed al-Sharaa, not Abu Muhammad al-Julani, not the alias, not the shadow on whom America had placed a $10 million bounty. You are here with your face and your name, in the capital you had dreamed of since childhood in Meze. But what happens in the first days after liberation is harder than you expected, and you had expected difficulty. Damascus is not Idlib. It is a capital diverse in religion and sect, full of deep wounds from 50 years of authoritarianism. People look at you with conflicting emotions. Joy at the fall of Assad mixed with fear of the unknown, fear of the man whose name had been terrifying in Western media discourse. Journalists come to you from all over the world and ask whether you will be another Taliban. You answer clearly, no. But you know that the answer alone is not enough. Actions will determine whether they believe you. You appear before the people in civilian clothes. You walk the streets. You speak of an inclusive government. You affirm that Syria's Christians, Alawis, and all its communities have a place in the new country. At this moment, you realize that the war was the easier part. Building a state in a country destroyed by decades of regime rule and exhausted by 14 years of war, this is the real challenge. Every decision you make now carries a weight completely different from decisions made on the battlefield. On the battlefield, you make a mistake and men die. That is a harsh price. In politics, you make a mistake and the country fractures again, and that price cannot be measured. A reporter asks you in an interview, "How do you describe what happened?" You pause for a moment before answering. You realize that the truthful answer is more complicated than one question can bear. At every stage, you stood before two choices, both difficult. There was never a perfect option. You joined people you did not fully agree with because they were the only available option, and you left them when you found room to move in a different direction. You fought against the Islamic State, even when fighting it also meant weakening yourself. You waited 7 years in Idlib because the timing was not right, and you moved when the window opened. Every one of these decisions cost you something. Friendships, the possibility of death at any moment, years of living under a hidden identity, and a distant memory of a house in Mez and a father who loved Nasser and hated separation. Now you sit in Damascus. The full weight of what happened begins to settle slowly. States come to meet you. States that had your name on terrorism lists yesterday now speak to you in the language of politics. Because you know that international recognition is necessary, but you also know that behind every negotiation is a calculation, and behind every handshake is a hidden condition. No one gives you anything for free. America wants guarantees, the neighbors want influence, and the Syrians inside want electricity, bread, and security before any political speech. You try to provide all of this at once, and you know that failure in any one of them will be used against everything that remains with you. At the end of every day, what remains is not victory. Victory was a moment, and it ended. What remains is the true weight of responsibility. These people who came out into the streets smiling and raising their fingers toward the sky have placed their trust in you, not in ideology, not in the organization, but in you. And that trust is heavier than any weapon you have ever carried. War, you know how it ends. Peoples do not end. Their demands do not end. And responsibility before them does not end. You know this now in a way you did not know before. Not as intellectual knowledge, but as a knowledge that lives in every decision you make and every morning you wake up in a country still learning how to breathe.